visitors, welcome, welcome. This is Mavuno Church Downtown. We meet here at Fungamano House every Sunday from 9 a.m. At 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. we have two services on Sunday, and we have kids and teen services that happen concurrently. If you're wondering who is this woman who's just yapping and hasn't introduced herself, my name is Pastor Joanne Kuria, or Pastor Jojo Kuria, and my husband and I have the distinct privilege of being the campus pastors at Mavuno Church Downtown. Great! So all month, ladies and gentlemen, we have been going through this sermon series. As a matter of fact, I rephrased that for us. I said, we have been journeying back. That sounds better, right? We've been journeying back to Eden. This sermon series titled Back to Eden, exploring God's wisdom for health and longevity. And you know, so far in this series, we've rediscovered God's original blueprint for our bodies and for our well-being. We've looked at 5 biblical health principles from the Garden of Eden that God intended to be normal practices, principles for every single human being. So let's do a mini recap here. So week 1 was all about food. We discovered that what we put on our plates is never neutral. When you look down at your lunch today, just understand that it's either harming you or helping you. You might not see the repercussions as you're eating, but at some point along the way, you might experience some of the repercussions. You know, we took a reflective look on our diets, and we said, you know, I love my tea. I take 5 teaspoons of sugar. Not me, but some people might take 5 teaspoons of sugar. And maybe this is saying, well, maybe let me reduce it to 2 spoons of sugar. Some of us might be KFC shareholders. Not officially. They don't know you. You're not in their books. But the drive-through in Hurlingham knows your name, knows your car number plate because you enjoy the chicken. But maybe it's time to rethink that choice. That week we said that you are what you eat. That what you eat doesn't just shape your body, it shapes your destiny. And then week 2 we got challenged to move it or lose it. That exercise matters for our bodies. You know, we reflected on how we live such a sedentary life. Like everything is within grasp. If you want your car keys, if you want your fridge, your pantry, everything is just within this grasp. And we said that we don't move nearly as enough as our bodies need for us to move. And we said that our bodies will actually thrive if we move, if we do exercise, if we move our bodies here and there. And that week we said, what you will be in life, you are becoming right now. And then week 3, we learned to work from rest. You know, we acknowledge that we live in this highly, highly fast-paced world. Like we run ourselves to the ground because this world is asking of us, it's demanding of our time, of everything within us. But we said, you know, what rest is, we don't necessarily rest because we are tired, but we rest because we are acknowledging that we ain't all that. You know, we rest because we are saying that this job you've given me actually belongs to God. This hands, my mind, my vocation doesn't belong to me. These things belong to God. So rest isn't a cop-out. Rest is actually a declaration that everything that I have, including that amazing job, that amazing business, belongs to God first. That week we said, when you put God first, everything else falls into place. Then last week we had this sermon series titled Heal the Land. We zeroed in on the environment. You know, we reminded ourselves that in the Garden of Eden, one of the very first commands that God gave Adam and Eve was to take care of creation. We said that this earth doesn't belong to us. We are merely stewards. That you and I have 80 years, 90 years, 100 years. And then when we leave, we need to pass the baton to our children. So think about this. Are you passing the baton to your children for a dilapidated world? To a world that was green when you were given, but now you're giving it brown? What kind of world are you passing on to your children? We said that this task doesn't belong to environmentalists or NGOs or even the government. It's our task as believers, that every place where a Christian lives should end up better than when you started living there. As your pastor, I want to just pause here and say, I know this sermon series may have challenged some of us to do something. Whether it's diet, changing, tweaking, something. Whether it's exercise, beginning to do 10K steps or whatever it is. Whether it's rest, acknowledging that rest is important. But don't feel condemned, because that's not the intention of this sermon series. That's not God's heart. As a matter of fact, his heart is to invite you back to Eden, to invite you back to a place of vitality, of refreshing, of wholeness, of peace, and of rest. So we began with food, we then went to exercise, we then went to rest, we then went to environment. Now it's interesting for me that all of these principles were present in the Garden of Eden. You see, when God created Adam and Eve, he put them in the garden, and I'm sure there was healthy food for them. I can imagine there was a rich, vast array of mushrooms and spinach and leeks and asparagus and whatever else there could be in the Garden of Eden. And then, after he put them in the garden and gave them good food to eat, he said, I'm going to put you to meaningful work, which ensured that they had some exercise. And then the God of the universe, who doesn't get weary, who doesn't get tired, said, you need to rest. And he didn't just give it as a prescription, but he said, I'm going to model it myself. And he does so. And he models rest so that work never becomes an idol for you and I. And then he gave them the role to take care of creation, so that we are responsible for the environment that we live in. But there was one last thing God created for them that made the picture complete. And without this thing, all the things that God had created would not have been sufficient. And that's what I want to talk about this week. Before we dive into what that thing is, there's nothing as good as a cliffhanger in a sermon series. Let me ask, which of these moments have you experienced? So scenario number one, you're dressed to kill, makeup on flick, you're feeling great, you're looking great, you're smelling good. But then when your day ends too soon, you think, I can't go home yet because not enough people have seen my outfit. Not enough people have seen this new Ankara skirt that I got made this week. Maybe scenario two, you finally bought this amazingly fruity or floral. Excuse me. You bought this amazing fruity or floral perfume, which is what I like, fruity or floral. And then suddenly you're just hugging people left, right, and center for no reason. Because you're like, somebody gotta smell, how good. Or maybe you buy some meat, you buy some nyama, and you're like, oh, let me go home and grill this, put this up on the grill. You fire up the grill. And then you're just there tossing and turning the meat, and you're like, who can I call? Like, who can I call? Maybe I call Tina. Like, somebody needs to see my grill mastering skills. You know, maybe you've been in some of these situations, and we may laugh because maybe we've been there, but it's not vanity. It's a deep God-designed need that even in the small things, we want to be seen. We want to experience it with people. We long to share that moment. And you know, if it's the truth with such mundane things like perfume or meat or outfits, how much more in the big things? When you land that job that you've been waiting for and looking for so long, after so many rejections, isn't it cool to just have somebody to call and say, I got the job, or I got promoted, or something like that? Or when you graduate, do you just want to be at the graduation square and nobody's cheering your name, nobody knows you, there's nobody there for you? It feels incomplete until you celebrate with others. And you know, the reverse is true. When you're seated at a hospital ward or room and you're waiting for life-altering results from the doctor, you want somebody who will just squeeze your hand and be there and tell you, we're in this together. Or if you're facing grief or job loss or family struggles, you long to have somebody who truly understands. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last thing in this sermon series that God created that made the Eden picture complete. So turn with me to Genesis 2, verse 18, and it says this: the Lord God said, it's not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. Now, let me tell you, that verse should stop all of us in our tracks. Because think about this. This is the omnipresent, omniscient God who is this super creative on steroids. He's so meticulous. He does this creation week by week, day by day by day. He says, it's not good for man to be alone. Now, listen, he creates the light. And he says, it is good. And then he says, let me divide the land and the sea, the firmament. And then he says, ooh, woo, it is good. And then he says, how about the planets and the suns and the moon, and the sun and the moon and the stars? And then he creates that and he says, it is good. Then he says, I'll create the plants and the animals. And he makes all these quirky animals that we don't even know how to pronounce, and he creates all of them. And then he just takes a step back and pauses and says, it's so good. He creates the flora and the fauna. I've always wanted to say that. And then he doesn't stop there, because he creates man. And let me tell you, he doesn't just create man by utterance like the rest of creation. With man, he says, this one is a specific task. It's a special task. And so what he does is he breathes life, his very life into man. And he's like, oh, it is very good. And yet, this is the context of Genesis 2:18. He does light, he says it is good. He does land and the seas, and he says it's good. Sun, moon, stars, he says it's good. Plants and the animals, he says it's good. Yet, he just takes a step back. And he looks at all of these, and he says, something is missing. And that's the first time God says, it is not good for man to be alone. You know, that, my friends, is a mind-blowing statement, because even in paradise, this perfect ecosystem, even with a perfect environment and a perfect relationship with God, remember, this was way before sin permeated the world. He looks back. He says, it is not good. He looks at Adam and he says, this man needs people. And that is a declaration that you and I were made to belong. From the very beginning, we were created for connection, for intimacy, for sharpening, for support. We were never meant to go it alone. Let me tell you, you can avoid chapatis all you want. You can eat only kale and water, spinach smoothies every day. You can run 5K a day. You can do your steps. You can get your rest. You can sleep 8 hours a night. But if your heart is heavy, if your friendships are fractured, then you are not truly healthy. The one thing I want to leave you with today is you can't be truly healthy if you are relationally disconnected. What we've done this month, ladies and gentlemen, as we journeyed back to Eden, is we've looked at these building blocks, those things that were there back then, back in the Garden of Eden, that God said, these things should be part and parcel of your day-to-day life, of your month-on-month. We talked about food, we talked about exercise, we talked about rest, we talked about the environment. But then the word today is, the summation of all of those things is lovely. It's all nice and dandy. But if you don't have this missing thing, the missing thing that even God of the universe took a step back, paused and said, something here is missing. Even with all of this, something is missing. If you don't have this missing thing, there's something in your life that is missing. And you know, it's interesting because this is not just a biblical or a spiritual construct that I'm trying to tell you today. It's actually backed up by science, by scientific research. Now, the longest study on human happiness was conducted by Harvard University. This research brought together 85 different people. Now, let me tell you, these were 85 distinct people. They were 85 people who were from different socio-economic situations and status. These were people who are of different races, different ages. This research said, let's make it as wide as possible. Let's cover the entire spectrum of people. And so 85 subjects were brought together. Now, these people were brought together from teenagehood up to old age, and they were studied. Every year they were studied. And it's interesting because it didn't matter if you came from a poor background, if you had little education, or if you were wealthy, you were part of that study. And as you can imagine, many of them were not alive by the end of 85 years, but the study continued with those who were left and even continued with their children. Let me tell you the crux of the study. The major conclusion. Now, I can imagine the Harvard University must have been looking for many things they could hypothesize about. But this was one thing that all the scientists said, wait, this is an interesting finding. The major conclusion of the study was that regardless of their backgrounds, those who were happiest, those who lived longest and enjoyed the best overall physical and mental health had one thing in common: strong personal relationships. Now, various scientific studies, even in addition to this one, have shown that good relationships in life lead to healthy outcomes, like lower blood pressure, reduced stress levels, better mental health, stronger immunity, better sleep quality, reduced risk of chronic conditions, reduced risk of dementia as you age, and a greater sense of overall well-being. So here's the thing that we may not necessarily automatically connect. Strong social connections are just as important for your health as factors like diet, exercise, not smoking. Truly, it's not good for man to be alone because God created us to need other people. Remember, you can't be truly healthy if you're relationally disconnected. Now, here's the interesting thing. So, Jesus is whole human and whole man, right? Yet, in his manness, in his human form, Jesus modeled this thing for us. Because we see that right from the beginning of his ministry, he chose to gather 12 friends around him. He walked with them, he ate with them, he taught them, he cried with them, he challenged them. He didn't just speak to the crowds, but Jesus built community around him. And he expected his disciples to do the same. John 13:34 says this, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another." It's interesting because following Jesus Christ is not a vertical endeavor. It's not, oh God, please help me. Oh God, I'm praying to you. Those things are great. That is necessary. However, what he's saying to us today as we go back to Eden is that in addition to this vertical endeavor, he's asking us to do this as well. It's horizontal as well. We were not created to be Lone Ranger Christians. We were created to be part of a spiritual family because you can't be truly healthy if you are relationally disconnected. So what does it mean to be relationally connected? I know that some of us here in this room are surrounded by so many people. So many people at work, so many people in our family. In fact, some of us, our problem is that we may have too many relationships. Sanguines in the house, mpo. Just a disclaimer for the sanguines in the house and the extroverted folks is, you might be surrounded by many people, but you need to discern and distinguish between fans and friends. And so maybe the sanguines in the room are wondering, what? But I got this. I have many people around me all the time. As a matter of fact, have you seen my social media feed? I have 5,000 followers. But also, I'm cognizant that this spectrum ranges from those who make friendships really easily and have many of them, but also to people who don't have so many and were potentially scarred or hurt by people along the way. But the thing is this: we are made for connection. That's the bottom line. It doesn't matter if you're an extroverted or an introverted individual or an ambivert like me. We were all made for connection. That's why you want people to check out your new outfit. It might seem mundane, but there's something pacifying it does for you at a soul level. I want to give you a simple visual that can help you evaluate your relational life. It's called the relationship bullseye. So this is the bullseye, and it has 3 concentric circles. One outer circle, a middle circle, and an inner circle. So if you picture those concentric circles, the outer circle, as you see there, is the crowd. So think of this as your hi, how are you circle. So these are your acquaintances, your colleagues, your distant friends, your neighbors, your social media followers. These are people whose faces you know, and they know yours. And when you say hi, when you meet them, but you don't have so much interaction between them. Now, these could be more fans than friends. You know, last night at the CC Winans concert, I met so many people, and thank God I am good with names and faces. More faces than names, but I was like, oh yeah, I was with you in campus, or I was with you in high school. But are those my friends? So this is an outer circle called a crowd. And because we're taking our cue from Jesus Christ, Jesus had plenty of these, because everywhere he went. Now let me tell you, this was before viral content. This was before the telephone. This was before smoke signals. Jesus was a viral human being. Everywhere he went, people were just drawn to him. He would aim to go to a certain city or town, and people have gone there before him. He was this magnetic character that people were curious about, and there were constant mammoth crowds going ahead of him, surrounding him every day. But Jesus models this and says, everywhere he went, the crowd gathered around him. They were curious, they were needy, they were watching him from a distance. Some were there for miracles, others were there for bread, but very few ever moved closer than the outer circle. Now, let me tell you something about crowds. You need crowds. You actually need crowds, because crowds are your networks. So build your crowds. One day you will need, who knows somebody who imports cars? Who knows somebody who plants trees? Who knows somebody who is a surveyor or something like that? You actually do need crowds. Crowds do have utility. And sometimes people in the crowd, if you're patient enough to linger, if you just take a little bit of time, could then go into the next concentric circle and become your community. But know this about crowds. Your crowd may clap for you, but they don't necessarily care for you. So if you have 5,000 followers on social media, thank God for you. That's amazing. Well, that's great. But just be able to differentiate what the crowd does. And so we move down to the next concentric circle, which is the middle circle, and this is your community. So this could be your friends, your family members, your team members, your classmates, your close neighbors. These are people who you interact with on a day-to-day or a month-on-month kind of basis. It's someone who calls your number and you see them calling, and you actually pick up and you actually have a conversation about them. These are people who know parts of your life. They know your birthday, maybe your kid's birthday. They know your anniversary. They can wish you a happy birthday message, things like that. But they may not know the entire picture for you. You enjoy them and they enjoy you, but they don't always see your scars or your struggles. Again, taking our cue from Jesus. Jesus had the crowd. And then whittling it down, he had the community. Now, the community for Jesus Christ was these 12 men that he was walking with, that had become part of his spiritual family. as well as several others who are mentioned in the New Testament. So these folks shared meals with Jesus Christ, had conversations, had a singular mission. This was Jesus' community. But, ladies and gentlemen, even here, not everybody in the community knew the depths of his heart. Again, the community is vital for us. Have a community, because it's when you need a wedding committee that this community will come in handy. Okay, Pastor Cookie? It's when somebody is bereaved that you will need a community to tell you, we got this. They will do the program. They will figure out the flowers, the transport. You actually need a community. So this is not a cancel thing. I'm not saying don't have a crowd, don't have a community. All of these are important because they play a certain part. But just like Jesus Christ, you must be able to differentiate who's in the crowd and who's in the community. Now, this is the thing about the community. Your community may share your table, but they don't always carry your tears. So, are we tracking? We've started with a crowd, and we are seeing we need this crowd. There's a utility for this crowd. Back yourself up with a crowd. It's important. It's necessary. Then when you move into the inner circle, it's the community. As again, we said, you need these folks. You need a classmate who's connected in the lands ministry, because you never know when somebody will encroach on the land you bought in Naivasha. So you do need that community. It's important. They do play that part. But just like Jesus Christ, he had this community, and he knew how to share meals with them and to have conversations. But remember, not everyone knew the depths of his heart. So moving closer in to the innermost part, of the circle. It's your core. Now, I'd like to call this is your no matter what circle. This is your life-giving friends. You know, these are the people who truly know you. They know the Jojo who stands up on a stage, but they also know the one who's not on a stage. They know the real you. They know your mistakes, the worst mistakes you've ever made, yet they will not leave your sight. They pray with you, they speak truth to you, they challenge you, they celebrate you. They are not casual friends. They are covenant friends. They know your deepest concerns. At any given moment, they know at this moment, Ijai is praying for this. Ijai is trusting God for this. That is your core. That's how well they know you. They anchor you when the storms of life hit. Now, if we take our cue again from Jesus Christ, Jesus had these people as well. Peter, James, and John. You see, they were with him at the Transfiguration. They were with him in the Garden of Gethsemane. In the moments that were too vulnerable to share with the crowd, these people who were his core were with him. Now, let me tell you, we live in an isolated, selfist kind of environment and world where it's easy for us to cancel people left, right, and center because it's not working for us. And so we have this very isolated life that we live. And we don't live it with other people. And the reality is that was never God's intention. That was never God's intention. You know, the men in the house, I want to zoom in on you just a little bit, and I want to go off script and just say that male friendships are a sight to behold. I feel like these Harvard people, once they are done with this 85-year program, should dedicate the same amount of time, if not more, to understanding male friendships. Because it puzzles me how you can be a man. Your marriage is at the brink of failure. You are in debt because you've gambled away your last savings. And then you go to a lounge and you're watching a game with your fellow buddy. And you're seated side by side watching Arsenal versus Manchester United. You're seated there side by side, and you're saying, yeah, yeah. But this guy has no idea. He has no idea what you're going through. And by the way, I'm not a man, so I can't even walk a mile in your shoes. And I think we are made differently relationally. But guys, even if you're a man, even if you're a woman, even if you're extroverted or you're introverted, there is a void in us. There's a specific way that God created for us to be able to commune with other people. It wasn't a women preserve. It wasn't an extroverted preserve. You know, I don't understand my husband half the time. And it's been 11 years. Hopefully by year 15, I will begin to unravel this onion. But let me tell you, the one thing that I have seen that is very peculiar with him is that he's a highly relational man. When we were getting married, he struggled to pick the men on our lineup. He wanted 12 men on the lineup. I said no. Is this a wedding lineup or what is this? I said no. And I was struggling to even get 6. May had 4 and I was good. I was like, this is it. But men, I don't fully grasp relationships from that vantage point, but I do think it can be done. This past Friday, I was trying to eavesdrop because he was hosting about 15 gentlemen. And I found all the reasons to go to the living room. I heated my hot water bottle, and then I went back to the room, and then I thought, I went and served myself some food, and all this time I'm just trying to listen and hear and see, but I'm like, this should be normalized. Because I feel sometimes when my husband would go to play squash with his friend, I can have belabored on an issue. I can have told him, we need to figure this thing out. And he's just, he's just there. He's just nonchalant. And then after a game of squash, he comes and he says, we are doing this. We are going this direction. In my mind, I'm like, have I not been saying this? But a win is a win. I'm going to take it. Let me tell you, I am a beneficiary of my husband's male friendships. For real, there's some things that in all my splendor, in all the pillow talk I can amass, I can't get this guy to move. Look at this drama. Sit down. Mavuno Church Downtown, what I'm trying to say is this. I'm trying to say that it's not happenstance that God created us the way he did. That there's something that we ache for deeply that is relational. In the earlier service, I talked about how this is the John Wick generation. It's a Superman generation. You know, those people are Supermen on their own, right? You want to do this thing on your own. You're always, yeah, I'm a Superman. You're a John Wick, you're a Rambo. And I'm like, sit down, Rambo, sit down. We don't need you to be a John Wick. It's not me. It's John Wick. Guys, we don't need you to be that because there is benefit. There's something about your soul being pacified by other people that is so critical that if you just lean into, you will get such beautiful, beautiful benefits. So one thing to note about the inner circle that is your core are the ones who don't just know your story, but they're willing to sit with you in the messy, murky chapters of your life. Turn to your neighbor, do you have a core? Ask them, do you have a core? You know, a couple of years ago, I stumbled upon a really, really good sermon series by T.D. Jakes. And T.D. Jakes in that sermon series talks about 3 different people. He talks about comrades, constituents, and confidence. Please look for it. It's old. It's maybe 10 or so years on YouTube. But he breaks it down and he says, this is why. That you have confidence, you have constituents, you have comrades. And it's important to understand and know these different people in your life. So how do we build healthy but realistic relationships with these people in all of these three circles? The first one is be kind to your crowd. You see, Jesus often had large crowds of people around him. He healed them, he taught them, he fed them, he encouraged them, he had compassion on them. But there were limits on how much access he could offer to these people. The Apostle John gives us this insight in John 2:23-24. While Jesus was at the Passover feast, the number of his followers began to grow, and many gave their allegiance to him because of all the miraculous signs they had seen him doing. But Jesus did not yet entrust himself to them because he knew how fickle human hearts can be. You see, Jesus loved all of these people. He loved and appreciated the crowd, but he didn't confuse this with intimacy. The same way, treat your acquaintances and your distant connections with love, absolutely, with warmth, absolutely. But remember, not everyone needs to know the deep things of your life, because not every follower is meant to be a friend. This could potentially be a mind-boggling sermon for Gen Zs. If I was preaching to them, I would figure out how to tailor this. Because if you're raising Gen Zs, there's this awkward notion that if you have 5,000 followers, you have 5,000 friends. And then when you post something on socials and you get this dopamine hit, because after 15 minutes, you have 100 likes, and then constantly you're refreshing. There's something so awkward and so interesting about that. I think there's beauty in understanding the social media space, but there's also an opportunity for us to guard and to do an inventory, understanding that not every follower is your friend. The thing about your crowd is you can be friendly, but you can put boundaries so that you spend the most time with those you are meant to be with. So the first thing is be kind to your crowd. The second thing in the concentric circle with your community is be present with your community. You see, Jesus loved and taught the crowds, but he reserved time and personal presence for his community. In Mark 4:33-34, it says this: with many similar parables, Jesus spoke the word to them as much as they could understand. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. But when he was alone with his disciples, he explained everything. So this is Jesus with the crowds, knowing full well, wherever I'll get into, whichever town I'll get into, people will follow me. And he says, with love and compassion and warmth, he speaks to these mammoth crowds. And he says, the parable of this, the parable of that, the parable of this. And so these guys are in the crowd and they're learning and they're taking notes. But then what he does is, he speaks to the crowd and tells them the parable of this and that. And then he turns to his community, his disciples, and says, let me break it down further for you. Let me make you understand. That's exactly what Jesus did. And that should be true for us as well. We need to identify in our lives the people that God has placed to be part of our community, whether in our neighborhood, family, work, or friends. And then endeavor to stay present for them, to share life with them, to encourage them. At the very least, know your community's birthdays. Know your community's anniversary. Know some of those special things. Allocate some time so that even when you have given so much energy to the crowd, turn to your community. Give them some time. Turn to your community. Give them some time. But even here, again, there will be limits. Because the reality is, it doesn't matter how extroverted you are. None of us has capacity to get soul deep with many people, unless you're my husband. But the reality is sometimes we try to keep up with the Joneses relationally. You want to be those people who, I have 7 best friends. No! You don't have 7 best friends. I guarantee you, take my word for it. And sometimes you want to employ this octopus tentacle thing for, I'm here and I'm here and I'm here and I'm here and you're everywhere. And you're trying to divide yourself in multiple places. What happens is you kill your capacity because it is not humanly possible for you to have those soul deep looking into each other's eyes, contending for each other, having those moments with multiple people in that way. And so remember that Jesus himself had the crowd. He looked at his community. With his community, he was present. He shared life. He participated in encouraging each other. But he still understood that there is still another deeper level with this. The third thing, we began by saying, be kind to your crowd, the outer concentric circle. We then got in and said, be present with your community. The third thing is be real with your core. So it's interesting how Jesus Christ had 12 disciples, and we had other people who walked with him, who are beside these 12 disciples. So there were more than just 12. However, Jesus had Peter, Jesus had James, and Jesus had John. Now it's interesting that if you chronicle the different scenarios and situations that you find these 3 men alongside Jesus, it was gut-wrenching, vulnerable moments. In Mark 5:37, when Jesus was resurrecting Jairus' daughter, we read, he did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. In Mark 9:2, it says, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, took James, took John with him, and led them up to a high mountain where they were all alone. There he was transfigured before them. In Matthew 26:36-38, then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, James and John, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Now, let me tell you, Jesus, the Son of Man, the Son of God, had these 3 men that he delineated from his community. He had Peter, James, and John, and he was vulnerable with them. Let me tell you, in Matthew 26:36-38, just a few hours later, the most excruciating thing was going to happen to Jesus Christ. He knew what was coming. He knew that this was going to be a moment that he would bear his soul. And he said, oh my gosh, I can't do this alone. Let me tell you, Jesus would have done a Rambo because he's God, isn't he? He would have done a John Wick. But this man knew, I'm going to be crucified. It's going to be an excruciating, humiliating death. And even though I am God, I am man as well. I can't do this on my own. So as you're seated there, how are you doing life on your own? When Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, didn't do it. He had these 3 men and he said, hey guys, would you contend with me for an hour? Would you do this with me? He needed his soul to be pacified. And that's why this thing is not a gender thing. It's not a personality, extroverted versus introverted thing. It's saying there is benefit when you're about to go through a trial in your life and people are praying for you. You're about to go through something in your job. And somebody is remembering you that morning, sending you an encouraging message. Let me tell you, we all need that. So turn to your neighbor and say, Rambo no more. You see, at this moment, Jesus brings his 3 close friends and he exposes the vulnerable feelings and emotions that he's currently grappling with to them. In this moment, there's no shame. There's no shame for, I'm a man and I just lost my job. There's no shame for, my family is dying under my watch. There's no shame for, I have gambled all our family reasons. There's no shame. It's at the height of vulnerability that Jesus Christ brings this men. You see, your core circle are the friends who walk with you in the ebbs and the flows of life, in the valleys and the victories. It's those who you can call and say, hey, I got a job. But it's also those who can call and say, oh, I've just been fired. It's those who you can call and say, oh my gosh, we're expecting a child. But also those you can call and say, we've just lost our child. That's your core. And with this core, you need to be honest with them. You need to give them meddling rights. Your boys need to ask you, hey, I saw you shouting at your wife. What's that about? Your girls need to ask you, hey, I think you're spending too much money on your hair and your nails. Sule, production team, I need this man out of this next Sunday. The reality is, with core friendships and covenant friendships, it's not a cozy thing. It's not about comfort. It's people who can call you higher. Say, you're slacking. I see you're slacking. You can do better. You can be better. They call you out. And they call you out to be a better person. Think about a football game. You see, in a football game, in the stands, you can literally have 60,000 people. Like those we've been having where? Kasarani. You can have 60,000 people. They're in the stands and they're loud. They're so loud. They're shouting and they're celebrating and maybe they're booing. When, who scores Morocco? Madagascar, Tanzania. Maybe they're cheering or they're booing, whatever. They're in the stands. There are 60,000 of them and they're loud. That is your crowd. They may celebrate you when you score, like we were celebrating Harambee Stars, but they'll also forget you when the game is over. But then down in the pitch, you have your 11 teammates, the people who you're all sweaty, you're all dirty because you've been running, you've been pacing, you've been trying to score this goal. The people who are alongside you and are doing this thing with you, they understand why we all need to go for cardiovascular strength. They get it. The guys at the stands could be very unfit, but they're saying, damn! But it's the guys beside you who understand training drills. They understand why we need to score this goal. They understand what is at stake. That is your community. And then within that team, there could be potentially your Peter, your James, your John. Those who you can take aside and just say, I'm down. That is your core. Mavuno Downtown, this month we've been learning about biblical health principles from the Garden of Eden that are meant to be normal for every human being. The first 4 principles had to do with food, exercise, environment, and rest. Today we're learning about healthy relationships. That without healthy relationships, you still won't be truly healthy. And here's the thing, healthy relationships will go a long way in helping you to have the companionship and accountability to be able to accomplish the 4 other things that we talked about. So let's land this plane and let's land this sermon series. And I want to give you just a couple of real-life action steps. The first one is, perhaps, could you do a relationship inventory this week? It won't take you more than 15 minutes. So maybe you can get out a paper or your notes on your phone app. Draw this bullseye that we did. And then name names. Who is in your inner circle? Who maybe shouldn't be? Who are you keeping at arm's length that actually needs to move closer? Don't just cancel people. Left, right, and center. So do a relationship inventory and ask yourself this question. Who needs to be in those spaces? Remembering that every single part of those concentric circles has a purpose. And then pursue the missing level of relationships intentionally. Notice the area you need to give most attention to and prayerfully develop. Don't just hope for better relationships. Do what my husband does. Invite them over and make sure your wife is not eavesdropping. Maybe this week, text that friend. Schedule that coffee. Say yes to a community. Maybe it's joining a discipleship group and saying, okay, I want to walk with these people. Purposefully and intentionally do so. Because the reality is, church is not a Sunday thing. It's on Tuesday when you have just been given a redundancy letter that you need somebody. It's on Thursday when you are tired and fatigued and exhausted that you need somebody. That's the community we're talking about, because you can't be truly healthy if you are relationally disconnected.